this is Lady Boulay, and welcome back to Black American Lineage. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your thumbs up, for your comments, and thank you for sharing the videos. Thank you for supporting this channel. And today we're talking about the audacity of this Congresswoman. And she really did have audacity. It is Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm, here by special request. I remember her being in the United States Congress, and she was something serious, and there really has never been anybody quite like her. The person that comes the closest is Maxine Waters, but Maxine Waters has a ghetto streak in her that Shirley Chisholm didn't have. Now, I want to point out that Maxine Waters' demeanor is probably appropriate for the time she's in, because she's dealing with a bunch of hillbillies and hoodlums in suits. So she has to come on with the come on to get along with them. And so that's what she does, and I don't hold it against her. But Shirley Chisholm was operating in a different time with a different kind of Congress. So she's really in a class all by herself right now. And probably we won't ever see anybody like her, because the times won't be the same. So she was extraordinary for her time, and she was effective. A few facts about Shirley Chisholm. She was born in Brooklyn in 1924. She served in the New York State Assembly from 1965 to 1968. She became the first black woman elected to Congress in 1968. Now, this is not to be confused with her being the first black person in Congress. There were black men in Congress as far back as 1866, but she was the first black woman elected to Congress. She served in the Congress from 1969 to 1983, and she ran for president in 1972, died in Florida in 2005, but in between, she did quite a bit. Shirley Anita St. Hill was born to immigrant parents on November 30th, 1924 in Brooklyn, New York. She was of Guyanese and Bajan descent. She had 3 younger sisters. Her father, Charles Christopher St. Hill, was born in British Guyana before moving to Barbados. For those who don't know, people from Barbados are called Bajans. Her mother, Ruby Seal, was born in Christchurch, Barbados, and arrived in New York City in 1921. So she is actually not of our ethnicity, but in the time that she came to New York, everybody just sort of merged together. It's only been lately that everybody's got to make a big deal about who they are. But she was a great asset to the Black American community, and so we're proud of her just the same. Her family lived in the Bedford-Stuyvesant area of Brooklyn. She attended public school in Brooklyn. She earned a Bachelor of Arts degree from Brooklyn College and a master's degree from Columbia University. In 1949, she married Conrad Chisholm, who was an immigrant from Jamaica. During their marriage, she suffered 2 miscarriages and discovered that she could not have children. From 1946 until 1953, she worked in education as the director of a nursery school and working in child care centers. But in 1953, she entered the world of politics. In 1953, she worked with a group in Brooklyn to elect the first black judge. That election led to a group called the Bedford-Stuyvesant Political League. That organization supported civil rights, fought against racial discrimination in housing, and sought to improve economic opportunities and services in Brooklyn. In 1964, she won a seat in the New York State Assembly. One of her early activities in the Assembly was to argue against the state's literacy test requiring English, holding that just because a person functions better in his native language is no sign a person is illiterate. And that's absolutely the truth. English is not a sacred language. By early 1966, she was a leader in a push by the statewide council of elected Negro Democrats for black representation on key committees in the assembly. That's right. You have to get on committees to get your name out there. Her successes in the legislature included getting unemployment benefits extended to domestic workers. She also sponsored the introduction of a SEEK program, Search for Education, Elevation, and Knowledge, to the state, which provided disadvantaged students with the chance to enter college while receiving intensive remedial education. In August of 1968, she was elected as the Democratic National Committee woman from New York State. In 1968, Shirley Chisholm ran for the United States House of Representatives from Brooklyn's 12th District. She ran on the slogan, "Unbossed and Unbought." She beat out two male opponents to become the first black woman elected to the United States House of Representatives. In her first term, Shirley Chisholm was assigned to the House Agricultural Committee, which she didn't think was appropriate, being that she was from Brooklyn, an urban area, so she was reported to have said, "Ain't no cows in Brooklyn," but I don't see that in any of the resources that I've used. Becoming the first black woman elected to the United States Congress was quite remarkable, and the speech that she gave after winning was hard to come by, but NPR recently found a recording of her speech, and this is what she said. "My dear friends, tonight is a very important night," she told her supporters. "Not so much for me, but for you, the people of this community. After many years of struggle and sacrifices on the part of several of you here this evening, we have at long last been able to elect today a voice that shall be your voice in the halls of the United States Congress." Within a couple of weeks of that election, Jet magazine put her on the cover. It wasn't until several months later, when she was sworn in as a member of Congress, that the country began to pay closer attention. In February 1969, Ebony magazine did a cover story. Later, she was filmed on the steps of the U.S. Congress by an NBC News camera crew, answering questions from visiting Brooklyn students from her district. I remember seeing her on this cover of Ebony magazine in 1969, and it was a big deal. Initially in the United States House of Representatives, Shirley Chisholm only hired women for her office, half of them black. In later years, she did hire men for both her Washington office and her office in Brooklyn. She said that she had faced more discrimination during her New York legislative career because she was a woman than because of her race. In 1971, she served as a founding member of both the Congressional Black Caucus and the National Women's Political Caucus. In January 1972, Shirley Chisholm announced that she would be running for President of the United States. She became the first African American in the United States, also making her the first woman ever to run for the Democratic Party's presidential nomination. In her presidential announcement, she described herself as representative of the people and offered a new articulation of American identity. "I am not the candidate of Black America, although I am black and proud. I am not the candidate of the women's movement of this country, although I am a woman and equally proud of that. I am the candidate of the people, and my presence before you symbolizes a new era in American political history, And that just shows you that she didn't know very much about this country, because she came to New York City, at that time considered a very liberal place. This is something that I don't get, and it baffles me about black people in public office. This is just something that black people might want to consider going forward. If you're running for president of the United States or anything, you don't have to get up and say, I'm not running as a black person. You don't have to say that. All you have to do is say what you're running for and what your goals for the country are. People already know you're black, so you don't have to stand up there and distance yourself from black people by saying, I'm not running as a black person, because white people already know what they think about you. It's not going to help you one bit with them for you to say that you're not running for president of black people. A white person is never going to get up there and say that. They don't have to. And neither does a black person. You don't have to get up and say, I'm not the candidate of black people. Just get up and say, I'm running for president, and let the chips fall where they may. Her campaign was underfunded, only spending $300,000 in total. She also struggled to be regarded as a serious candidate instead of as a symbolic political figure. And that is what they were saying. It was just a symbolic gesture. The Democratic political establishment ignored her, and her black male colleagues provided little support. Well, after she said she was not running as a black person or for black people, I actually don't blame them. What was she expecting them to do? She later said, when I ran for the Congress, when I ran for president, I met more discrimination as a woman than for being black. Men are men, and that is true. In particular, she expressed frustration about the black matriarch thing, saying they think I'm trying to take power from them. The black man must step forward, but that doesn't mean the black woman must step back. Her husband, however, was fully supportive of her candidacy and said, I have no hang-ups about a woman running for president. Security was also a concern. During her campaign, 3 confirmed threats were made against her life, and we're not surprised by that either. Her husband, Shirley Chisholm, served as her bodyguard until Secret Service protection was given to her in May of 1972. Well, she was doing something extraordinary for a woman, let alone a black woman. The Democratic establishment chooses who they want. If you want to get up there and challenge them, they don't care, but they're not going to support you, and they're not going to give you any money. And that is still the case for candidates who are running for president. President Obama was chosen by the Democratic establishment, and that is why he got money, he got support, he got everything he needed to win, and that is what he did. But she did not have that kind of support at the time, and I don't think it's fair to blame that on black men. Shirley Chisholm was not unlike a lot of black immigrants that come to the United States. They underestimate the racial issues that exist between black and white Americans. So they move to these big urban areas like New York or Florida, Miami or California. Those places are not indicative of what the real America is about. You have to be in the South or the Midwest, in the center of the country, to know what it's really like. So they have great ambitions, and they think black Americans are making all this stuff up until they get out there and try to do something like run for president. And then they either start talking about America being racist, or they start blaming things on black America, saying black people are jealous of them because they're doing this or they're doing that. That's not what she said. She didn't say they were jealous, but she's indicating that black men didn't support her. But those black men were just getting back into Congress themselves after all of them being kicked out in the early 1920s. So they had to go back and build their base and build political power before they got back there in the first place. And she really did underestimate the political system in the United States, even though it was very good that she would get out there and try. But she was networking with these old Southern bureaucrats, Dixiecrats as they are called sometimes, Black American men weren't doing that because they knew what they stood for, and they weren't going to go groveling to them. She even visited Governor George Wallace when he got shot in 1972. She was going to network with those white bureaucrats, and maybe she got one or two things done. It didn't endear her to her colleagues, is how I'm reading it. Even when someone compared her journey to Harriet Tubman and Rosa Parks, she blew that off and said, well, Harriet Tubman was a slave and Rosa Parks was a domestic and she was educated. And these are the kind of things that put a distance between her and some of her Black American colleagues. She had to follow her ambitions and her goals, and they had to follow theirs. So they're not responsible for her not getting any farther than she got, because those old white people have a lock on both the Democratic and the Republican parties. And you are not going to rise any higher than they want you to rise, no matter how great your ambitions are, no matter how intelligent you are, and no matter how much you want it. And you just cannot eat enough cheese to get farther than what they have decided you're going to get. Things are changing now. But in 1972, she got as far as she was going to get. In 2003, 20 years after she left Congress, Tavis Smiley asked her which had been a bigger obstacle during her career, being Black or being a woman. She said, I met far more discrimination being a woman than being Black when I moved out into the political arena. All kinds of meetings and all kinds of groups got together in order to stop me from moving into politics because I was very outspoken and very articulate and didn't take guff off anybody. And really, that is the image that she projected to the public. I can speak, I know what I'm talking about, and I don't take any mess. Shirley Chisholm's first marriage ended in divorce in 1977. She was granted a divorce in the Dominican Republic, which sounds like a quickie. Later that year, in November of 1977, she married Arthur Hardwick Jr., a former New York State Assemblyman whom she'd known when they both served in the New York State Assembly. And he had now moved to Buffalo and was a liquor store owner. She indicated that while her legal name was now Hardwick, she would continue to use Chisholm in politics. So she began spending more time in Buffalo, which brought some political criticism that she was being inattentive to her Brooklyn district. In 1979, her husband was badly injured in an automobile accident. Desiring to take care of him, she decided to leave Congress. Now this is very telling. After leaving Congress in January of 1983, she made her home in Williamsville, New York, which is a suburb of Buffalo. She wanted to resume her career in education. She had hoped to be placed as the president of Medgar Evers College or the City College of New York in Manhattan, but her past political opponents were influential in the selection process, and she did not receive either post. Similarly, she wanted to become the chancellor of New York City schools, but was blocked by the teachers union and some of her longtime political opponents. This is when visiting George Wallace, the governor of Alabama, in the hospital after he was shot, and voting with the Southern Dixiecrats on issues in the House comes into play. You go back to New York, which is a liberal state, thinking you're going to get a political appointment, you're going to be disappointed. They don't forget. So no political appointment, a good job you might say, that she would have been expected to get in New York came through for her. So she ended up teaching for the next few years. She visited college campuses and gave over 150 speeches. Also, she supported the Jesse Jackson presidential campaigns in 1984 and 1988. Her husband died in August of 1986. She moved to Florida in 1991. In 1993, President Bill Clinton nominated her to be United States Ambassador to Jamaica, but by then her health had begun to fail. Shirley Chisholm was inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame in 1993. She died on January 1st, 2005 at her home in Ormond Beach, Florida. Her health had been in decline after she had suffered a series of strokes. At her funeral, the minister said Shirley Chisholm had brought about change because she showed up, she stood up, and she spoke up. She's buried in the Birchwood Mausoleum at Forest Lawn Cemetery in Buffalo, where the legend inscribed on her vault reads, "Unbought and unbossed." Shirley Chisholm was a force to be reckoned with. There are a number of memorials left to Shirley Chisholm, including a 407-acre state park in Brooklyn, New York. Also, on March 23rd, Netflix is releasing a biographical drama about Shirley Chisholm, the first Black Congresswoman in the United States House of Representatives and the first Black woman to run for president in 1972, and Regina King will be starring in this movie as Shirley Chisholm. Shirley Chisholm was a remarkable woman. She danced to the beat of her own drum. She made her mark. She served her generation, unbossed and unbought. I'm going to leave a link to the trailer of the Shirley Chisholm drama in the comment section of this video. Okay, y'all, thank you for listening. Thank you for suggesting that, Tracy F. I hope you enjoyed the video. Leave a comment and have a safe and wonderful day.